All right, what is up, fantasy fans? This is Shay from the channel Zachary Shay. I'm here with my friends Nikhil from Shelf Esteem, Jake from Nerd Level Rising, and David from Four Corners of the Page. How are you guys doing?
Very good.
Awesome.
Everybody doing good? So we're gonna have a discussion on the last of the Atlanteans. And with this being pre-recorded, and I see most people clicking on this having already read the books, I think we're gonna be spoilers vague to completely spoiler filled. So no worries about that. And I guess we could just go around and say like what stood out to us in this book. I could go first and say that I thought that this book definitely improved upon the writing, the pacing from book one. I think Othrun has grown a lot as a character since book one. I especially love how one thing I was not expecting going into this is how much he humanizes the antagonistic forces and even people on our own side, like Yedwul, that in book one were shown to be very despicable. When we do get Yedwul's background, you know, even though there's a lot of things about him that you can condemn, you're still empathizing with this guy that's really not a great person. But I love how PL never makes it like so far, it doesn't feel like there's any like straight up Cersei, Lannister, Joffrey, Baratheon type characters that are just all bad. He tries to humanize each of the antagonists, which I appreciated. Maybe Lacey's father, I don't know. I don't want to make a blanket statement. There's probably somebody, but I do like how he tries to humanize everybody on each side of the conflicts. So that was something I definitely appreciated. And what about you, Nikhil? I don't want to put you on the spot, but what are some things
yeah.
that stood out to you?
I was actually very impressed. When I first read the first 25% of the book, there was some similarities, I think, to the first book. And I was kind of curious to where it was going to go from there. And after that, for me, it kind of took off. And by the 50% of mark, I was kind of completely in. And then that last 50%, I think I read in one day or something like that. So
Wow.
I guess we're gonna get more into the spoilers, but I think some of the turning points was really midway through the book where a big battle happens, and I was kind of pleasantly surprised at who was spared from that and who was not. I kind of expected that certain characters would make it through to, would be a larger presence than they were. I also felt like Othrun's kind of biases and prejudices, like you really start to see the cracks in the armor there.
Right.
Because the first book is very much, you can see that this is not a completely irredeemable character, but is definitely on the side of, very hard to read their viewpoint every once in a while, because they'll just say something that they fully commit to and fully believe in. I also felt like there was a couple slight POV alterations, I guess you could say, where it's like you're seeing everything through Othrun's eyes, then suddenly you see something through someone else's eyes. And so then it starts to reframe what you'd been seeing as, you were seeing everything from his perspective. So I thought there were a few little clever things that were done throughout the novel that kind of I hadn't seen done in other fantasy novels. So yeah, it was a really nice, pleasant surprise, I think, especially that last 50%.
And what you're talking about with how you see him like Othram become more humanized in this book, and then I think the 25% mark that you're talking about is right around when they get into Lycoon and
Yeah,
that conflict starts to kick off. And I remember right before that conflict started, I think it was a stable boy or something had an accident, and I was surprised by how much that affected Othram because like book one,
yeah,
a pagan stable boy, I don't think he would have cared.
right.
And
Yeah.
that was very interesting to see as this espionage story is kicking off. Uh, um, Him walking a mile in somebody else's shoes and seeing this different culture. And the
Yeah.
action scenes he wrote in that second book were really, really good.
Totally. Yeah. I felt like completely invested in that whole battle sequence.
Mhm.
I think like the way it was the pacing of the battle sequence was also fantastic. Like it was just enough that you felt like you were kind of in the thick of it with them, but
Mhm.
also you could kind of zoom out and see what was happening at the same
Agreed.
time. It was really nicely balanced, I think.
Do you have any thoughts, Jake, on what? Oh, how's it going?
There he is.
So sorry I'm late, guys. I was in a stream that went later than anticipated, but
Oh, no worries, no worries.
so where are you? Don't
Good to
let
see
me
you.
interrupt. Good to see you all. I'm excited to chat about this book right here. So
Heck yeah, heck yeah.
Absolutely.
all right, please don't let me interrupt though.
So I think it's my turn to jump in. I think we're kind of at the point where it's sort of general reactions, not too deep into spoilers, but like it's, you know, we don't need to be too awfully careful since most people have probably read book one at least, right, to watch this.
Okay.
So my general reaction, to build on what Shane and Nikhil, what you guys had talked about, I thought the action in the first half of this book was fantastic. And I was really surprised isn't the right word, because I liked the action a lot in book one. I thought those were some of the stronger parts of book one for me. That duel with Whores and then, or Whore, either way. And then when they're in the mountains towards the end. I like both of those things a lot. And then in here, we get the much bigger scale battle, and we're seeing the people moving around, and they have to go and, you know, get creative and, you know, walk through a certain area to get access to the bridge and, you know, all this stuff. And I'm like, it was so great, right? I really, really was invested in the action. And I thought that it was just descriptive enough that I had a really strong, clear movie in my head, but it wasn't like, you know, Othrin took his sword and swung it this direction and then spun this way and found this person. It wasn't too overdone. So I like that a lot. And then Nikhil, you talked about the second half of the book and how it was getting a little bit more, you know, politics and different nations and all that kind of stuff. And I think the world just grew so much, and I really appreciated that. And I'm excited to see where we leave off here at the end of book two. It seems like we're going to go get to explore more of the world. So I'm excited to see more of that and how these different people are different, because it seems that each of these different nations has some pretty strong, distinct differences, whether it's their traditions or the way that their succession works or whatever, right? It seems like there's some things to explore there. And I think the biggest lasting impression I have before I kick it to the next person here is that last line of this book just hit me like a truck, and it was just the perfect way to end it. And it just, I don't know. I got chills right now. I still get chills just thinking about it. It was just perfect. So
What was
big
it?
fan.
It was like, and I think on all that I have gained and all that I've lost, and I weep, or something like that.
Something to that effect. Yeah.
Yeah. Then for all I had gained and all those I had lost, I wept.
Yeah.
It's a great final line, isn't it?
Great final line. You just see
Very
the
good.
weight of everything, both positive and negative. It was just perfect.
All right, David, what were some impressions that you had of this book? What stood out?
I hated it, man. It was awful. Just kidding. Yeah, so I want to echo a lot of what you guys were saying. The battle sequences I really enjoyed, and this kind of growing complexity that we're getting of this world and things like that. I really enjoyed. For me, I liked the Drowned Kingdom. I really enjoyed The Last of the Atlanteans. I do still have some gripes that maybe we can get into, and I know Shay, we've talked about some of those. But broadly speaking, I was impressed with so much of what this novel is doing. In particular, the character of Othrin. And getting his sort of increasingly, I would say increasingly unreliable internal monologue, and the way that he's so blind in some areas, but so clever in some areas. And I love this journey that he goes on, particularly in the first 2/3 of this novel, where he, as I think Shay, you were saying, sees how the 99% live, if you like, and how that's kind of unlocking a lot of sensitivity within him that he didn't really have in Atalantics with his immense levels of privilege. And seeing him trying to contend with that, sometimes implicitly on the page, was really enjoyable. Yeah, and I think also with Last of the Atlanteans, we're getting increasing levels of, I don't know how to say it, interpretability. And maybe this was there in book one and I was just skipping past it. But for example, I was thinking about the Atalanteans in this book and how, you know, very much from Othrin's perspective, they are kind of refugees trying to find a home. But there's also the second layer to it, right? Where they're also colonizers. And, you know, Othrin is having to contend with both of those at the same time. So that there's a lot of stuff that I really respected from The Last of the Atlanteans, and so much so that I already have book 3 right here. So take that as you will. But those are some of my thoughts.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. And Philip, what are your thoughts on the book? What did you think of the book overall? What stood out to you?
Yeah. So first, again, I apologize for being late, and I probably
no worries.
But let me talk about this book. Yeah. Some of my favorite writing that Peele's done that I've encountered so far is in the second half of The Last of the Atalanteans. I really started to feel invested and loving the story when we got the flashback from old Yedwall. And that chapter, for me, introduced in a way that I thought it was present earlier, but it introduced in a really brilliant, profoundly important way this theme and the complexity that you guys were just talking about in terms of Othran's character. He started to realize, okay, so to be a king, I have to do some pretty awful things. I have to fulfill this ambition I have, which I think of as being a good thing. I have to do some horrible things. Like my uncle, he told this story of what he had to do when he was essentially reconquering this colonized land, and the atrocities that he committed. And this is a guy who's a hero. He's a hero to this culture, to the Atalanteans. He's the greatest warrior of his age, and on. And he made that reputation by doing some horrific things. And it's interesting to me because I feel that Othran, first of all, we don't really know much about the Othran of the present, the narrator. Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of times he's very honest with us, and he's even self-aware in a way that the character Othran in the story is not. Clearly, the character Othran is a bit of an idiot, and he's a kind of a single-minded, I'm the greatest, and I got to get my glory, got to be the king of everybody, and he's very full of himself. The narrator Othran, though, I'm really curious to see where PL brings this, because that's where I start to see some interesting things going on here, where I feel like it's possible that the narrator Othran is being critical of himself, and in his honesty, he says stuff like, "Yeah, I was a coward here," or I was really full of myself, and I'm thinking, I'm interested to see where he brings that. But a lot of that, I think, starts with that flashback chapter that is even told from. This is the first time I think PL's done this, where it's not Othran speaking to us, it's Yedwall speaking to us, and we get the story from a first-person perspective, but it's Yedwall, the old, telling his story, and the horrific things he did in order to achieve his status, and to the way they brutalized people, and the way that was essentially propagandized in the home country as being a great and glorious thing. But you see that this guy, he had some major PTSD from this, right? You see that he's aware he did horrible things, and he's aware of what that did to him as a human being. And here's young Othran in the beginning of his journey of conquest, realizing, oh, I kind of have to become this, don't I? If I'm really going to do this, what I'm setting out to do, I'm going to have to hurt a lot of people. I'm going to have to do some horrible things. Well, okay, I guess I'm going to do it. But, that's kind of where we are now. But that last line that you mentioned, Jake, that to me shows us that here's a guy who is aware of what this journey is going to do to him. And he's still willing to do it, which tells me he's still kind of a jerk, but he's at least self-aware enough at this point to realize I'm gonna be seeing a lot of loss here. Not only am I going to end up killing a lot of people, but a lot of the people I love who are near me because of this ambition of mine are probably going to get hurt and maybe even die. So yeah, I thought this is an aspect of this that I really loved.
And that whole conversation, or that recounting of that tale, comes in the context of Othrin basically kicking Yedwall out, and in that very kind of scene, doing some pretty nasty, awful things, alongside also trying to erase the history of what really happened in Atalantic. So he's already making those decisions as he's in this conversation with Yedwall. Yeah.
Yep. And much to even his cousin protests, Uthlin, is that his name? He says, "No, I can't do that. I'm not. I'm going to write the history as it happened. That's what history is." And Othrin's, "No, you're going to write this propaganda that I'm telling you to write." Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It seemed to me sort of like that Yedwall stuff was like it's like an obstacle in the way of the path that he was going. That he's still kind of going down that path, but now I don't know if it's a somewhat more begrudgingly going down that path, or if I could see him almost feeling like a martyr in a way of like, oh, I have to do this for my people, but like really he just wants to do it, but that's how he's justifying it. That's gonna be so interesting to see how that all plays out. I have a question for you guys on that note also of the Yedwall stuff. When I was reading this, that chapter shifted something in like how I was perceiving the narration, to where from that chapter onward, and then now in retrospect, it kind of feels that way again when I go back and think about book one and like him just going on about how much he loved Atalantics and the shape of the city and all this stuff. That Yedwall chapter made it feel like I'm watching a play, and this is the guy off to the side who just stood up to say this piece. But the rest of the time, it's Othrin saying everything. But like that's really how it feels to me now. Is it feels like it's like a play, and the guy is narrating everything, rather than older Othrin telling us his story in past tense. That's kind of how it's feeling to me. Does that make sense, or do you guys think I'm off base?
I definitely think like in the battle scenes, there is like sort of a dramatized theatrical. It's like I dispatched however many so-and-so, and it's not necessarily how someone would describe these events happening to them. It definitely feels more of the theater. So I can see that.
One of the reasons why I like the fact that PL had this told from Yedwall's perspective as a first-person narrator was that I feel like Othran in many ways identifies with his uncle. He sees himself in his uncle. And so he gives him that same narrative role in that moment. I like that a lot. I like that because we're meant to see the parallels between these two in terms of their life journey, and how they were both second sons, how they were both overlooked, how they had to prove themselves, the resentment that was there. I think it goes both ways. I think Yedwall sees himself in Othran as well. So I like the parallel that we get there with a bit of Yedwall's voice. And I think it's a signal that we're meant to see the parallels between these two, and start thinking about this theme of, okay, you have this ambition, and it happens to be being the king of everybody, being the king of Acremia or whatever. What are you going to have to do to achieve that? And is it worth it? And that's the question that Yedwall was facing, and probably never would have admitted, but probably at many points in his life wondered, was it worth it? So yeah.
Did
He
any
was
of you
probably
see?
definitely thinking that when he was disinherited. One question, this is probably just super conjecture, and I'm going to let you speak, David, in a second. One thing I've thought, this is purely conjecture, but the way that Othrin talks about Yedwall the Lesser, part of me is wondering is like how much of that is jealousy, how much of that is Othrin's own guilt for disinheriting that line? Because at least so far in the story we've gotten, like every description we get of Yedwall the Lesser is like he sucks, but like most of his actions are not as egregious for the descriptions we get. So I'm like, are you jealous because he didn't really have a patriarchal figure in his life that cared for him outside of Yedwall? Like his own father didn't really love Othrin in the way that he wanted. So I've thought that myself a couple times about Yedwall the Lesser, but I guess we won't know until we read on. But
He's kind of grappling with his own legitimacy, isn't he? And because with the Angeli character who comes in, as spurious as that individual, whoever they are, is, it comes with the association that you don't actually, maybe you have some kind of divine right, but you're according to the bloodline, you shouldn't actually be king right now. And so I think
What was it?
grappling-
Glathan said, like, you think the angel cuckolded your father?
Yeah.
I was like, what
So
am
I guess that's maybe tying into it too. All I was going to say, Shay, was I've heard P.L. Stewart say elsewhere, I can't remember where, that there's a chance that Othrin is a bit kind of overconfident in his narrative with his own kind of capabilities as a warrior, because he always talks about how fierce and triumphant and amazing he is and how powerful he is with the blade. But we never see it basically on the page. We never see it on the page. When these fighting and combat scenes are happening, it's always people like Thorol and Glathan beside him who are the ones kind of really doing the heavy lifting. So there's that kind of layer. I guess I'm trying to relate that to the point about old Yedwall. Maybe he is believing that about himself, not just because he's a bit pompous, but because he wants to be like Yedwall.
Interesting, yeah. And there was that moment too, which I'm really interested to see where this goes, where Yedwall apparently was spoken to by the Anjali as well.
Yeah.
And of course he's dying, and Othrin is like, "Wait, what did you say?" And everybody's like looking at him like, "That's kind of inappropriate, let him have his ravings or whatever." But that totally makes him think, is this Anjali thing what I think it is? Am I being played?
In the languages, I just remember now that you mentioned it, he's like, yeah, we taught you the common language of the land. And Othrin was like, no, the angel gave me this foreign tongue. And his uncle was like, no, you were taught that.
That whole narrative is being called into question here.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite aspects of the series so far, both that and the magic. It's still unclear exactly whether it's real, and if so, how powerful it really is. And I love that. It's so cool. I'm definitely feeling more and more confident because Yedwall also mentioned seeing the angel. Then I'm like, okay, that seems like it's actually something. Whether or not it's actually an angel or not, who knows?
Right.
But at least it's not just 100% in Othrin's imagination, which I wasn't leaning that way, but I was like,
I had
maybe.
Similar thoughts.
Yeah.
I was like, do you have something going? Is there a worm in your brain, Othrin?
Maggots. There's maggots in his
maggots.
Right?
There are 3 of them, actually.
Yes. Yeah, when it mentioned the languages thing, my jaw absolutely dropped. I remember I was at the DMV, like just reading, waiting in line, and I was like, just because it's like, okay, we were lied to at some point.
You also, just kind of adding to that, it's like you really feel the contrast, because the first book and a half, he's so sure of himself and so sure that like everything he's doing is preordained. And it's kind of set up from the very beginning that he's like one of the few survivors, right, of this cataclysmic event in book 1, and how he's being spoken to and kind of given visions and stuff. And like, I feel like you could really feel how it shakes him to his core. I'm curious to see like what are going to be the ramifications for his character, and then also like from a fantastical world building perspective, like, is this a good entity? Is this a entity for ill? Is he being manipulated? Was Yedwall being manipulated? Yeah, it's interesting.
Exactly.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Do you guys have the foreword that's in the Broken Binding edition, just as we're talking about Othrin? Because I found it a fascinating kind of opening page. Do you guys have what I'm talking about? That it starts, "Dear Reader."
Is this when he was basically saying like Othrin is not me? Don't hate me because I wrote this guy? Yeah.
Yeah. I won't read the whole thing, but "Dear Reader, my protagonist of the Drowned Kingdom saga will undergo a journey where he'll evolve and change to some degree. He's a bigot, patriarchal, a misogynist. He is intolerant of the religions of others." I found a really interesting forward, because it very much highlights the journey that Othrin is going to go on, and that he's still very much on in book 2. And it's true, one thing maybe to touch on in this capacity is kind of infidelity and Othrin and Lysy, and we're into full spoilers now, right? Yeah, and we are. Because this reveal at the end that Senti was actually seduced, and that's part of the reason he did everything he did. And Othrin's like, yes, you've been terrible, and I'll keep this because I'm a holy man. I'll keep this to my secret, but make sure it doesn't get out. And also, you're a terrible person. I'm like, you kissed another woman in the first 100 pages of this book. Calling the kettle horny. Do you know what I mean? It just drove me crazy. So, and it's purposefully driving me crazy. And I really appreciate, again, that complexity of Othran and all these different elements to him that sort of clash.
And his
I think
hypocrisy,
it's
even when
really
his
adorable.
brother-in-law is like calling him out, he's like, "How dare you question me?" And he's like, "I know you did it."
And he shows up with the white stuff all over his
Yes,
face.
Yeah.
the painted mage, her makeup came off on him, and he's like, "How dare you accuse me?" With the evidence all over his face.
Yeah.
One other thing that PL said, and you know where it was? There was a Drowned Kingdom deep dive a couple of years ago when this book came out, and I'll link it to you, Shay, if you want to link it down below. But another thing that was said here by PL Stewart that I thought was really interesting. He pointed out that Othran has never had in his life up until this book a woman challenge him in any capacity. It's all been kind of these strong male role models, and a lot of the clash that Othran is experiencing with Lysie isn't just the seductress. It's also the fact that he's encountering a woman who has authority and power in her own right, and he doesn't quite know how to deal with that.
Yeah, I think he's interested, right? Even just because of that. I mean, he's attracted to her also, right? But just her power, and then also like her power, like politically, but also seemingly magically that she can read his mind and things, right?
I think it's in the maybe the 70-80% mark where he goes on like kind of a mental just kind of dialogue within himself, talking about like, oh, his wife is the picture of everything he should want on paper and blah blah blah, but also it that he feels for the first time that he's being like you mentioned, challenged or made to think of in a different way.
I feel like when he describes his wife, though, it's always like she is this beacon of purity, and she is what a good Atlantean should be attracted to, and it's always about her purity. But when he's describing Lysie, it's more sensual. It's more, in my opinion, there's a lot more pheromones going on in the Lysie descriptions than for Othran's wife. He's got a whole torrent of emotions going on with her. He's like, well, I respect her, which I wasn't expecting. I'm aroused. I'm shamed that I'm aroused. He's got all sorts of stuff going on with her. But
although he does tell us that his wife does swear when they're making nookie. So
oh, right.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. But no, I think one of the fascinating aspects of this series so far is that relationship between Othran and Lysie. It was one of the standouts to me in the first book, actually. And I really like where he's taking this. And it's one of those things where I don't know where he's going to go necessarily. Is this obsession with him going to turn ugly at a certain point where, you keep denying me and I'm going to be your enemy. And that could be a really bitter enemy, or could it go another direction, which you often see in like classical, like in the Aeneid, for example, or something like that, where it's more like she pines for him and will do anything, and he sort of treats her like garbage, and then she ends up dying tragically, that kind of thing. There's so many different directions he could go with this, and I'm fascinated to see where it goes. But I feel like she is a really strong character who, as you've already said, challenging his notions about the way things are, challenging his notions about the social order, about patriarchy, the patriarchy that he comes from. And I love that there are good aspects to his culture. There are things about the Atalanteans that are noble and good. And then there are aspects of them that are very bigoted. They're kind of racist and they're very patriarchal. But they do have values. They don't like slavery, for example. That's okay. I'm on their side whenever he's critical of slavery. I think, Othran's complicated. He's complex. Yeah. So I love what he brings out, what PL's bringing out in this relationship with Lysie, how it challenges him and pushes him to change his perspective. And it, as you said, it's this mixture of attraction and repulsion, and and he's probably a bit ashamed of himself for being as attracted as he is, and so it's bringing out a lot of complex feelings in him. Really rich stuff there. That relationship is another thing that I think that stands out for me.
Agreed.
Yeah,
agreed.
I very much agree also. How do you guys feel about the we spend all this time trying to get to the kingdom, right? And we get there and we find it's his brother, right? That's like taken the throne and all this stuff. And there were so many interesting things. Like I think there was a couple big, like world building tradition type of things there that I'm really interested in seeing. Like the trial by combat stuff was really interesting to me. On like what was it, Orlu? Was that his name?
Yeah, the brother.
That he just like bypassed that and was like, no, this is just mine now. And so like, how strong is that tradition really if all the people still got behind him? And then, but I think the thing that I'm even more interested in is you are not supposed to kill a mage. That's supposed to be very, very bad. And they did it. And so far, nothing bad happened. And I'm curious to see like how tangible is it actually bad? Is this going to be an instance of him seeing like, oh, this is like a weird superstition that doesn't make sense? Or is there going to be some kind of magical curse or what? Because he also didn't wield the blade himself, right?
Well, something bad's going to happen to Glathan. Something bad's happening to him for sure.
Probably.
It was interesting also. They mentioned how like I think Glathan mentioned when he was about to do it, like she almost had a smile on her face or something like that. I forget exactly how it was described, but that kind of clued me into she has other tricks up her sleeve or something. There must be something.
Also, she said, "Hey, I'm preggers, so don't do it."
Yeah.
Right.
Killed a pregnant mage. Oh, Glathan is cooked.
Even worse.
Yeah.
Curse double.
I love that scene. I think it happens a couple of times where basically I think Senti says it, then someone else says it. Listen, she would be the best monarch here. If we're just laying out all the attributes of everyone in the game, she is the best. And I'm loyal to Welly, or I'm now loyal to Welly in the case of Senti. But actually, she's the best of all of us.
Of course, as
really
it turns out, he's just a little biased there. Because she seduced him. Yeah. But yeah, I think that probably is true. It's also interesting to me how Welly is not completely innocent. Like he did cheat on Sita, right? And so she had a legitimate grievance against him. So it's not like Welly's just innocent and they stole his throne from him. He did something really bad, and he kind of admits it too. So as much as she's painted as the villain, she had a legitimate grievance there. And so that, again, there's more complexity to this than it's not just good, bad kind of thing.
But I also think like that grievance she brought up, she's like, hey, 19 years ago or however long it was ago when we first got married, you cheated. We need that baby here so we can realize that they're part of the legacy. It's like, no, you're going to kill that child. Let's not pretend you're not going to. Or, I mean, who knows what she would have done, but I think her aims there were pretty nefarious.
And have we met that child? Because remember, Senti, for example, was of an orphan, I think, right? Yeah.
Oh, that would
Maybe
be Oedipus. So. That would be super Oedipus.
She wasn't the mother. She wasn't the mother. It was some other woman.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Oh my goodness, you're right. Yeah.
But still, stepmom, I guess. Yeah.
That would be crazy. Huh.
Can I ask a question Can I ask a question that might be incredibly dumb? And it isn't incredibly dumb. When you've been reading the series so far, guys, did you envisage it as taking place in our world in the extreme past or in a totally separate fantasy world?
Totally separate.
I took it separate.
Yeah.
Separate.
When I was reading the Drowned Kingdom, I kind of maybe like Wheel of Time or something took place in the very, very long ago past of Earth, and it was only this book. I went, oh no, I think this is a completely distinct world.
Was it the Atlantis?
Yeah, I have an idea.
Was it the Atlantis references that you?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it was. You know, Atlantis equals Atlantis, therefore our past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be fair, and Nikhil, I'll stand up for us. Wheel of Time is in the future, bro.
Right.
Yeah, guys.
I'll stand up for us on that one.
Well, I guess the Middle Earth.
Middle Earth. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
It was in the future and the past, I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
And the present.
Yeah. The wheel turns.
Yeah.
Was it in like the first episode they pan out and there's like skyscrapers? And
Yeah,
like, oh,
that's right.
Early reveal.
In the
Yeah.
in the
TV
first
show?
season, yeah.
Before the breaking, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Did Shay, I think I was talking to you about this. The fake out death. Were we
That-
upset about
that
it, or did it
element-
work for us?
I don't think me and David talked about this as well, where part
Mm-hmm.
2 ends and he goes, "The king is dead," and then part 3 starts and he goes,
Oh.
"Ah, just kidding."
Yeah.
That part, if you didn't set the book down between part 2 and 3, that part does read a little funny.
Yeah, because I was on a plane, so I went straight through, and I was just like, "Oh,
Me
that was
too.
odd." That was really my only complaint about the book. I was like,
Yeah.
everything else was awesome, but that piece was a little iffy for me.
Didn't work for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a
I
little
think
warped
it
to
says something
but-
about Othron's state of mind, though, that he thought he was dead.
Fair.
You know,
Yeah.
that he is relying so much on this guy, Welly. And if Welly did die, then he'd be kind of screwed.
Yeah.
So I feel like it tells you a little bit about his anxiety.
Mm.
Good point.
Maybe. Yeah. Just to
I think just the gravity with which I read that final line in part 2, "The king is dead," and then part 3 starts, I was wrong. It was just such a toss up where I was like, look up from book, shed one tear. I was wrong. Oh, well.
I think it's what you were saying, Jake, where it's like, and Shay, I think you said this as well, because with the reading of a cliffhanger, you do just turn the page and you just immediately see it. If it was a TV show, then you would have to wait a week and find out what happened next, and it might be slightly more, palatable. But because you do literally go to the next page, it feels a bit more, maybe blunt.
And it's the last line of the previous page and the first line of the next
Yeah.
page as well.
Yeah.
But you also couldn't have that at like the end of the book, because could you imagine if you like waited months for the next book to come out and it was I was wrong? That probably would have hit a whole different way. You would have been like, I thought this guy was dead for like months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a
Be tricky. Anyway, if that's only the complaint, though, it's still a pretty damn good book. If you only have that one little thing to like, oh, that was a little bit. iffy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't quite call it a complaint, but something, and I know that PL Stewart is very aware of this because he's talked about it in reference to book 1 as well. I am continually going back and forth or considering or reflecting upon the structure of the series from book to book. And because neither of these books have followed a particularly standard narrative structure, which is fine, you don't have to. But it's something I'm continually grappling with. You know, book 1, I mean, the joke from last time was, 300 pages on the beach. And here it's, the book sort of ends 75% of the way through. I mean, the last 25%, although we talked about, for example, Gedwall's narrative and the origin of Carthluge, all of that almost feels like an epilogue to the 75%, which is the main book, although that's a poor way to describe it. So I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts about the structure of the series and the individual books.
Yeah, you're not wrong about the structure. As it happens, though, my favorite part is what you call the epilogue. From that point on, I was like, okay, now we're cooking with gas, So I loved that part. So I didn't mind the fact that, okay, the adventures with getting Welly back his kingdom and all of that. I liked it. I enjoyed that too. It was great, good swashbuckling stuff. But for me, it got deeper and more interesting when we get the Gedwall flashback, and everything after it too is sort of, I think, painted with that flashback at this point. For me, anyway, I read it that way as okay, this Othron guy he's kind of struggling, but we see him insisting, no, it was a perfect, beautiful day when I was made a king, and this beautiful place and everything else. But then you get that last line too, and you get that sense of you're starting to realize the price here that you're going to be exacting on everyone you love, and the atrocities you're probably going to have to commit in order to make this ambition of yours a real thing. So I liked it overall, but you're not wrong about the way it reads as sort of a kind of separate thing from everything that precedes it. But
yeah, it's interesting to me too that I think back on book 1, and it's like I was so taken aback by the structure of, I assumed that I was like, the kingdom's going to go underwater, like I know this is going to happen, right? But I assumed it would be the main climax of the book, not the very beginning. And so it kind of put me on my heels of like, oh, this is is this going to be one of my favorite things about Wars of Light and Shadow is that Jenny's always playing with our expectations. I was like, okay, is he going to be doing this here as well? And I'm not sure how I feel about that piece in particular, but nonetheless, we have that happen, and then we have the rest of the book, but like by the end, it's sort of setting up what's going to happen in book 2. And then this one kind of felt similar, that we had this big thing happen in the beginning that sort of quote unquote resolved-ish some of the stuff at the end of book 1. And then it sets up what we're going to go do in book 3. Like now we have this new quest, and I'm curious on if that's going to continue that structure. PL, when I talked to PL on the channel recently, he told me that like he has a very different thing in each book. That like book 3 is very up and down, or I can't remember which book was what, but like one of them does this weird. There's a lot of build up, and then like a big slow part, and then this big climax at the end, and then this, he's like constantly doing different things, and so I don't know if my thought of we're going to have this kind of, we're going to finish what we started in the last book and then set up the next book. I don't know if that's going to continue book to book or what, and maybe that's kind of what he's going with. I don't know. That's kind of what I've been thinking about recently, though.
It's a little Malazan-like in a way. I don't think he's read all of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but every Malazan book does something different.
For sure.
Maybe that's an interesting comparison there.
Yeah.
It was interesting in your interview with him, Jake, which was excellent, by the way. I told you before we started.
Thank you. Yeah, it was all him.
How excited PL was talking about book 6, because he said something along the lines of, books 1 to 5 are this, but book 6 is where things really, like, the lid just gets blown off. And I was sitting there thinking, if books 1 to 5 are the standard, book 6 is going to be something really exciting and bananas potentially. So it was really interesting hearing that.
For sure. And like we've gotten enough glimpses of potentially what a Black Dragon on Red could mean that like I'm very excited to get to that book and see where all that goes.
Agreed. I definitely like, if you look at the average fantasy book structure, it's like you kind of have like a Stuart Lanch, you have like his rising action right smack dab in like the 50% area of a lot of building action, a huge page turner. But to echo Philip, I definitely think you get more to chew on after the falling action, after that climactic sequence where the mage is beheaded. And, my first reaction is like, oh, this is slowed down quite a bit. But upon completing the book, it's really that latter half that I think about more, even if it did slow down the pace quite a bit. I don't think we could have had those revelations. I don't think we could have had Othrun questioning himself as much if we kept, I don't know, like a Pierce Brown type pace where it's just continuously building and it's a page turner throughout. I feel like you kind of have to pump the brakes to ask these bigger questions. And I do feel like where we left, like, I agree with Jake that this is setting up book 3. Like we have these conflicts in other nations being set up, but I also think book 1 and 2 do kind of tell a complete story, like point A to B of how Othrun got from one mindset to where he's at right now. He's still questioning things, like his growth isn't complete, but it did feel like a good, like, little duology within the series. Like it resolved a lot of things while still leaving things open.
It's a good stopping point, really, is like, okay, now we've founded East Realm, and for that to happen, of course, they had to get Welly back on his throne first. So it's a logical stopping point, I think, for the series, for book 2.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
I was
One thing I've been thinking. Oh, sorry, Jake. When you go.
I was just saying, I felt like I had something more to add, and then I was like, I don't. So I'll just I'll leave it.
This is my second silly question, because it's called the Drowned Kingdom, and so maybe you're just going to look at me and say it's gone. Do we think Atalanteans is totally destroyed and everyone on it has died? Are we truly looking at the last of the Atlanteans here, or do you think, just because we spent so much time in book 1 describing the place and all these people and all this legacy, do we think it might come into play in any way more than just memory, or any of the people who were on Atalanteans when it was destroyed? Do you think they might be coming back in some capacity?
I do.
You do. Well, who's going to find out? Old Yedwall, because they put him in a boat.
Yeah.
Cast him.
That's right.
He just gets back up. He's like, wait. Old Yedwall, I was like the same thing at the beginning of part 3. I was wrong. Yedwall said,
No,
Sounds
I definitely think so, right? Like, what's the first thing you think about when you think of Atlantis? Oh, it's an underwater city.
Mhm.
So, like, at least that's the first thing I think of. And so I wonder if there's going to be some play on that somehow the city's still.
And there
I don't know
was
if
a lot of
intact, but
attention
something.
given to Atlantics for
Mm.
how quickly it was sunken within the book.
Mm.
But I also know that PL has expressed that he wants to do prequel trilogies that explore Atlantics before the sinking. So maybe it was setting it up with that in mind, and that was part of his world building process.
Sure. Or at
So I
least
can
give
see
it.
it going either way. Like this will come back into play, or perhaps we really are just focused on the remnants of the kingdom
Right.
as we see them.
Yeah. And
I mean, the
just to
first. Sorry, Jake.
sorry. I was just to clarify my thing. Like, I realize Atalantics and Atlantis are not a 1-for-1. I realize they're different things, but just clearly he's drawing some
Oh yeah,
inspiration from that, right? So I guess that's how far down that road is he going to go? Is my thinking. Continue.
I do want to clarify though that I was being a little facetious there about old Yedwall, but I do like the kind of Boromir style funeral. He
Exactly
gives.
what I thought too.
same.
But also how in Lord of the Rings, Boromir somehow goes over the falls, Rhoros, and ends up being still in the boat. Everything's still in place. Like, okay. And I love how he has Othrun reflecting on how Yedwall went out to sea or whatever. And he says like, yeah, I know it didn't really happen, but I'd love to think that it went out there and all of this. He has
He's lying with the ancient Atlanteans.
Yeah. So he's kind of like, I know I'm lying to myself here, but this is what's comforting. This is what's romantic to believe happened, but I know it didn't really happen. So I kind of like that.
I was just going to say it's really interesting. The first map we get, at least in this edition, is Atalantics. It's not Eltnia. It's not. Forgive me. The third continent in Libya. Atlantics is still the thing that's front and center, at least of this edition, as you open the book. Yeah.
And maybe that's just because it's so central to who Othrun is and why he's the way that he is, and like maybe it was just set up so strongly to like really hammer home, like, you're not going to like everything about this guy, but it's because of where he came from and how he grew up, and that's so important to him, and that sort of thing.
Of course, it does say Atalantics before the drowning.
Yeah.
So if it said after the drowning, it would just be a blank page.
Yeah.
This is the map of Atalantics after the drowning.
But David, previously you brought up the forward in the Broken
Yes.
Binding edition, saying like Othrun is not a great person. And I do find it bizarre how much PL feels he has to preface with that. But I feel like there's been fan backlash against Othrun as a character. And I just know, like, for me, definitely there are things he does that I think are like really like dumb, bigoted. But I don't think that this is like the most reprehensible protagonist I've ever read. I definitely do not like. I've read Jorg from Broken Empire, and I appreciated that series quite a bit as well. But that character is inarguably more of a monster than Othrun. And, Jezzel is a fan favorite from First Law, another character I really enjoy. But he's got a cruel streak to him that I don't even think Othrun has at times. And I wonder why that is, why this character specifically.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's because he views himself as such a good guy. He views himself as noble and righteous, and that's kind of what rankles people. Whereas Jezzel, I don't think he does. I could be wrong. I don't really remember. There's maybe that element to it there, and Jorg kind of knows who he is, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he's very self-realized. It's
interesting though to compare him to the first-person narrators, and I think there are some parallels with Severian in a way, but I'm still, like I said earlier, what's fascinating to me is how much self-awareness does Othrun, the narrator, have, not the character, because the character is an idiot, but the narrator, who's clearly an older version of Othrun. And I think right now I'm inclined to lean more toward there is self-awareness there, and probably regret, and probably because there are moments of just brutal honesty about himself, that I feel like if he's not learned from all these experiences, that wouldn't be there,
Yeah.
So I feel like this is a bit of a confession in a way. I'm beginning to read this as more confession than bragging, you know.
Yeah, it echoes Sun Eater a bit to me. I know not everyone here has read the whole series, but like you get a lot of that of just like, man, like I was so dumb back then, and like you just get that feeling of how much they've changed and how much that weighs on them, their actions in the past.
Well, I remember from book 2 when I forget the name of the culture, but it's people of color in their world that are like very good engineers and architects and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, I was astonished at that time to figure this out. So that leads me to believe that like present day Othrun was like, whoopsie, like I definitely learned that one. But it like I remember he ponders this quite a bit, and I do think that there was a disconnect from how Othrun in the scene was thinking about it and how Othrun now is thinking about those things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very intrigued to learn more about those people for sure.
I have a feeling we will.
Yeah.
We definitely. Have you read the short story, Philip?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does it touch up on that?
You're telling me I need to read the short story.
Well, it depends, right? So, we certainly will learn more. Mm-hmm. It's just, do you want to learn that from the short story and have that looming, or do you want to have it be a surprise during the series?
So when is the time to read the short story, do you think?
I'm not sure. I think it's a prologue story, or at least takes place before all the events of the series. I'm not sure. You know, when I talked to PL about it, he was like, yeah, like I didn't, based on how you're experiencing the story and how you're reading it, I don't think that you'll care about spoiler, quote unquote, from this. And he was right. It didn't bother me at all. And in fact, I'm just more excited to read the books. So like, I think all of us would probably feel similar way. So you could probably feel safe to do it now.
Maybe it's maybe it's a Deadhouse Gates, Knights of Knives situation where one spoils the other, and there's no right way of doing it.
Yeah, that seems reasonable to me.
Or like
it's not like
a similar comparison. Is it like Sundering Star for Wars, where it's like you probably would have found this out within the main narrative?
Yeah,
but now you're finding it out this way.
Yeah, I think so. So now, like, since we read Sundering Star, we were able to pick out some things that some people who didn't read it, they just glossed over.
Right.
But now when eventually they get those reveals, they'll be like, "What is?" Right. And we're gonna be like, "We knew it all along." I think that's a very good comparison, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, it's a cool story, but there will be more world building stuff to come that I'm very excited about.
Oh, what did y'all think? This is such a random note. What did y'all think about? Because I feel like this series, much like Von Roycroft's Sundered Nation series, you don't know how much of the magic is really going on. They talk about that in book 1 with like the bleeding corpses. Like, did you just see into the future a little bit? Or did you actually manipulate the elements? One thing I thought was cool that grounded that magic within the perspective of Othrun was the fact that he can smell the sorcerers, like different odors. His mind correlates with the different sorcerers. I don't know if it's mentioned that this is a gift the Oncali gave him, or if this is just something. Maybe it's one of the maggots in his brain. We don't know. But that was one way that I thought, again, didn't give us too much. Like, there's no fireballs being cast or anything, but it gave us enough to be like, okay, there's some magic going on here, and made it feel a little bit more real.
Yeah,
it reminded me of the Witcher, Lilac and Gooseberries.
Yeah. It did the same for me as well.
Yeah. I don't know how to feel about the magic, man. It's and I love that. That's one of my favorite things currently with reading it, is trying to figure that out, because you have the end of book 1 when it did Lycée conjure all the fog and like really help them escape or not, right? Was it just the weather and they got lucky? Mm-hmm. Or how much did she help in this battle, or did she just have the connection with the guy at the bar or the tavern or whatever? And can she actually read his mind, or is she just very perceptive and very knowledgeable, and she's able to people who are mentalists or whatever in our world, how it seems like they can read your mind, but they can't actually, right? They just really good at context clues and predictions and probabilities and all this stuff. So
you have Seer there who tried to pull a Saruman and bring the snow to bury the oncoming allies of Othron and his people, and it ended up just being rain because apparently being pregnant weakened her is the explanation we eventually get. But but that would imply she certainly believed she was doing something there, right? She seemed to think that I did this, but so they think it's real.
Yeah.
When Lysty encounters Othrin in what's the name of the brothel town? The brothel town. When she encounters him as the beggar woman, doesn't she she magic paw? Doesn't she isn't she magically transforming into the beggar woman? It's not just kind of makeup and clothes, right? So there must be a little bit of magic there. Am I misremembering that?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Like she's first, yeah. I mean, she is kind of in the shadows there at first. So is it just really good impersonation, or is there magic involved? It's ambiguous, I think.
Yeah.
She pulled a Maleficent and went from crone to batty mage. Really,
that's funny. But that's also why I'm interested in is anything bad going to happen after they killed the mage in the battle, right? Because if something does happen, then I'll believe more so that the magic is all real. But then what if something happens and it's it's a coincidence?
But how PL has talked about it, he doesn't want the magic to be he has written the magic in a way to where you're not quite sure if it's real or not. And I feel like that in and of itself is a confirmation that something bad's going to happen to Glathan. Because if nothing happens, then it's just the magic's made up. So I feel like it's going to happen in a way to where you question, was this because of his actions or was it just an accident?
Right.
I don't think it'll be all sunshine and rainbows when every single member of this land is do not kill mages. That's the one thing you cannot do unless it's sanctioned by a king, and that's the first thing they do. So,
even more broadly than that, PL said, I forget which book he said with you, Jake, but didn't he say, you don't even know what the series is about? Not even these kind of smaller elements like the magic. You don't know even what the narrative is yet.
Right.
There's so much more to go, and clearly a lot of forethought and planning. So it'd be interesting.
Oh, he said he already knows what the cover of book 7 is. He has since day one. He has planned every single thing. He said.
Book 7 is actually called Sunshine and Rainbows.
It might be.
And it's Glathan on the cover, just here.
Is there a unicorn on that one?
I think that's book 8.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I missed that reference. That's okay.
All right. Do y'all have any closing thoughts before we sign off and see y'all next time for book 3?
I don't know that I do. I think I've said my piece.
I'm excited for book 3. Yeah, looking forward to it.
I enjoyed it.
I'm very excited.
Yes. This was a step up. I really do. I enjoyed the first book, but this was a real step up. And what I hear from people like Jenny Wirtz is that it just keeps getting better. So I'm excited for book 3.
Yeah, when I was reading book 1, she's like, book 2 is where he will really sell you on the series. And I can definitely see that. I was kind of sold already on book 1. I was already in the camp of liking it. But I could see how someone who was hesitant about book 1, book 2 really, really sells the series. And he improved on his craft a ton, in my opinion. I think it's evident within the first 100 pages, he's firing on all cylinders with this one. So
I think maybe that is one good thing to say for the, and well, I guess if you watched this far, you certainly have read the book. But it's maybe we should have said it on the front end. But a lot of the things in our discussion on book 1. So there were some people with some, I think, valid critiques of. There were times when the dialogue wasn't super smooth, or it felt a little bit repetitive, or there was just some stuff that it felt a little bit like he hasn't mastered this yet.
Right.
And I think none of that, at least in my reading, was there in book 2. I think everything was, all the prose was smoother, and it was more refined also at the same time. It just you can just tell that he became a much better writer, which you would hope happens, right? From your first book that you write, you would hope is your worst one, right? So it's it was great to see that.
Yeah, I would agree. Across the board, better book than book one, which is, as you said, I think most authors would love to hear that about their series, that it improves with each installment. So,
Yeah.
all right, guys. Well, thank you all for chatting, and I look forward to chatting with you all about book 3. Thanks, guys. Peace.
Thanks.